50th.
And welcome to Facebook Live, the United Democrats of Onondaga County. I'm George Kilpatrick, and tonight we are joined by John Mannion. He is a candidate for the 50th State Senate District and looking for your support. So we're going to find out a little bit about John and how he's doing and get you involved in the conversation. So if at any time you want to find out why John wants to represent you, then you can hit the comments up in our Facebook chat, and we'll certainly get those conversations to you, and we'll get as many people in as we can. Now, if any of our previous Facebook Live conversations are a barometer of measurement of the interest, I would suggest you get your questions in early. And if you see me sip this tea occasionally, it is because you hear what I sound like, and so that's why I have this tea. Who did you say?
You sound fine to me, George. I thought maybe you were preparing for a Kathleen Turner sound-alike contest coming up. But
surely you kid. Okay, so let's find out about you, John.
Yes.
You are a teacher.
I am a teacher. Yes, I've been a teacher for 25 years. So I was born in the city of Syracuse. I've lived in the town of Geddes at the time that my wife and I were married about 21 years ago. We're both teachers. So I've taught at Christian Brothers Academy, Nottingham High School, and then for the last 19, I've been at West Genesee High School. I'm an AP Biology teacher.
AP Biology.
That's right, and other sciences. I teach other sciences as well.
Wow. So you've really been, you're right on the front lines working with youth, and that's one of the reasons why I understand that education is so important for you.
It absolutely is. You know, we've gone through some changes in the education system, some education policy, and it's always changing, but some of the changes in the past few years have been a little bit controversial, and I have strong opinions about that. But also, being a science teacher, I feel like I understand a lot of the challenges that are facing us as a society as we have to balance things like development along with harmful algal blooms and polluted water and things like that. So, and as you mentioned, the youth, I've taught for 25 years, which
Sure.
means I have students that are 43 years old. And I feel like I
really?
Yes, I do. That's right.
Hard to think about, right?
It is. And one of the greatest things about this is that many of them have reached back out to me, not just to say hello, but to say, hey, do you remember this story or what happened in class or when we did this project or whatever, which is really one of the coolest things. But I feel like I've got to, the citizens of tomorrow, which are already having kids and have kids in school, I feel like I have a great connection with that generation, and then the generation that's just approaching voting age, and many of them are very energized and in tune to what's happening politically.
You know, when I met you, one of the things you said, I'm an everyday guy trying to make a difference for the people of this district. What do you mean by that?
Well, I hope that I am. I came from a working class background. My mother stayed home and took care of us. My father worked for the railroad for 42 years, New York Central, Penn Central, and Conrail. And my mother went back and worked for the telephone company. We didn't have much, but I lived in a great neighborhood. I emphasize, and my wife emphasizes, hard work for our children, respect to adults, things like that. I just think that I'm a teacher. I'm a regular guy. I mow my own lawn. I do those things that I think common people do, and I have not been trying to ascend up the political ladder for the last however many years. I've just been doing my job and advocating for teachers, and that's really what got me here. So I feel like I am, a regular guy.
First run for office?
It is my first run for office. That's correct, yeah.
And you, of course, we're talking to John Mannion. This is Facebook Live. A reminder that you can ask John any questions that you would like, and we'll get to them as soon as possible, where you want to know what he's going to do for the district. One thing I want to ask you about is why you want to be a representative for the 50th.
It's a great question, yes. Yes, well, I'm a lifelong resident of Central New York, and I care about Central New York. And I feel like many people do, I believe, that there's some frustration with some of our elected officials. that some of the tax legislation that's gone through, or some of the rollbacks on the environment, are really not what people, I don't believe it's the will of the people. I don't believe that that's what people are asking for. And I feel like there may be a little bit of a disconnect between some of our elected officials and the common people. And as a result, I feel like I have a skill set where I would be a good candidate and a good legislator. I'm a teacher leader, meaning I represent 400 teachers at West Genesee, which means I go through arbitrations and I negotiate contracts, and I hope in doing that, and I believe I have, I maintain relationships with both my members and administration. So I feel like I've done some things that are legislative-like, and I feel like I can be a strong voice for the district.
Yeah, let me ask you about a couple things. So right here in the town of Geddes,
yes,
was a big thing that just happened for over 13 days.
Yes.
The New York State Fair. What's the impact here, and what do you think about the changes that have been made to the fair?
Well, I think they're positive changes. You know, I have a lot of great memories of the grandstand for a variety of reasons. My father enjoyed horse racing. That was a bonding experience that he and I would have with the Syracuse Mile. So it's a little tough to see that go. And then also some of the concerts that were there. So that's a little bit of a bittersweet moment when I walk those grounds. But I think overall, obviously we've had record-breaking attendance, which means pretty quickly these changes have been good changes that are resonating with people. And, you know, it's great to share some of the things that I experienced as a kid with my kids. So it's a good thing, I think.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you want to do if you were elected? What's your platform?
Right. Well, important things for me would be, we live in an area that it's well documented that we have very slow economic growth compared to the rest of the state. In fact, I just listened to Comptroller DiNapoli the other day, who mentioned that 90% of that economic growth is occurring in New York City and the surrounding areas, and that is not 90% of the state. So I feel like we have a lot of strengths in the area, and we have to make sure that those education ties, like the skills that students develop, are going to be easily transferred into good jobs in the area, especially since we have a lot of great health and tech jobs. So that's an important thing for me, is economic growth, and that ties into the poverty issue. You know, being the 13th most impoverished city in this country, and particularly for the Latino population and the African American population, to have the highest concentration of poverty, or the highest percentage of poverty, means we are not succeeding. If we're not all succeeding, none of us are, really. And that is something that I believe has to be addressed. We have to find good pathways out of poverty, and that usually means skills, which lead to jobs, and that's the pathway out. Additionally, we have a need, I believe, in this state for ethics reform. We have had multiple elected officials that ended up being indicted and convicted, and if we don't have a government that we can trust.
You're talking about ethics reform.
I am, yes, ethics reform, exactly right. Ethics reform when it comes to how public dollars are spent, and then ethics reform, of course, as it comes to some things like redistricting. I believe we need an independent commission to redistrict so we don't have the gerrymandering that we've seen. I'm in favor of term limits. I'm in favor of campaign
term
finance.
Limits for who?
Term limits for me, I hope. Term
How many?
limits.
So what?
I think a lot can be done. Obviously, it takes a little bit of time to learn the job, but I believe term limits are a good thing. When we hit 12 or 16 years, I think that's a reasonable time to get some things done.
8 runs, and that's about it.
8 runs, yeah. I guess if you break it down that way, it might seem a little outrageous too. Yes. Yeah. But I believe that is part of a solution, I would say. And then also, I think there needs to be greater oversight over public dollars from the comptroller's office. I also believe that we live in a time where there's more big money coming into politics than ever before, and that is not a good thing, in my opinion, with the Citizens United case. So I'm hoping that I can get in there and I can do some positive things related to campaign finance reform.
Let's get you involved in the conversation. We're here at Facebook Live with John Mannion. He's a candidate for the 50th Senate District seat. Of course, this is the seat that's opened up as a result of the retirement of State Senator John DeFrancisco. So if you have questions about what you would like to see your elected representative in this district, your district, let us know. What are the boundaries, by the way?
Oh, well, it's a unique map, I guess
Yes,
I would
it is.
say.
Yes.
It encompasses 13 towns in Onondaga County, 4 towns in Cayuga County, including about 2/3 of the city of Auburn. And if you looked at a map of it, it almost encircles the city of Syracuse. So the towns of DeWitt and Manlius are the eastern towns. Onondaga to the south, not Cicero or Salina, but Clay to the north, and then a small fraction of the north side is included, but the majority of the city of Syracuse is not. I started out my adult life living in the city of Syracuse within the 50th Senate District. I believe it was called the 49th back then, and by the time I left, I was no longer in it. So I was in the city, the district was in the city, but then most of the district is been carved out, I think is the verb they use, out of the city.
Russell says hi, by the way.
Okay, thank you, Russell. I appreciate that. Yes, is Russell? Well, there's lots of Russells out. Russell could be one of my former students.
Russell Dumbrow.
Oh yes, he's not one of my former students, but he could learn a thing or two. So yeah, thanks for saying hi, Russell.
All right, James wants to know. Where do you stand on the county DAs and our state AG opening up investigations along the lines of Pennsylvania into the abuse of and cover up in the various dioceses in New York?
Right. Well, I am a Catholic, and I'm a practicing Catholic, but in organizations that have, unfortunately, they could have done more to protect children. I'm sorry.
Let me give a context for
Sure.
the background.
Yes.
So why don't you give us the in Pennsylvania, what happened?
Right. So there was a recent grand jury finding that I'm not going to get the numbers right, but a large number of priests had
nearly 2,000,
yes,
you could say,
right, have been accused, or there's much evidence to support that there was abuse of children.
Right.
I am endorsed by the Protect New York Kids group, which is advocating for a change in that victims of abuse can go back and receive retribution for the harms that were done to them, and there would be no stipulation or less stipulation on timelines. So I think we've seen some horrific things around the country that have come to light at Penn State, at USA Gymnastics, and within the Catholic Church, where reports were made and unfortunately decisions were made that instead of addressing those reports appropriately, almost the exact opposite had occurred, and victims were not heard. Staff was allowed to stay or moved around, and we have to protect our children. And
so to his question,
yes.
Do you support? Do you support them opening up cases as they've done?
I am supportive of that. I am supportive of that because I believe that abuse that occurs at a young age sometimes is not reported for whatever reason at that young age, and I wish I could say that that any time an allegation was made, it was unfounded, but unfortunately allegations were made that were founded, and children that could have been protected in the past were not, and I believe that those victims need to be heard. And if they're being heard in a court of law, then I feel that that's appropriate.
So that would require legislation in New York?
It would, and there has been some...
Why hasn't that moved, do you think?
I believe, I don't want to speak out of turn.
Right.
Let's remember, I was just a citizen 3 or 4 months ago, and I'm new to the game. But I believe that legislation had made it through the state assembly, and then it either did not make it to the floor of the state senate, or it did not, or it was voted down. I can't remember exactly which. So as someone who hopes to represent this district within the state senate, that would be the position that I would take, certainly, in that I would advance that legislation. I would be willing to co-sponsor it. I believe I've said that publicly to some degree, and I certainly would vote for it as well.
Your questions for John Mannion here on Facebook Live. I'm George Kilpatrick. John is a Democratic candidate. Of course, you know that because you're in the United Democrats, right? Democratic candidate for the 50th State Senate District seat, covering most of the city, for 13 towns and four towns in the town of Cayuga County, I should say. And so we certainly want to hear from you if you have any questions or thoughts that you want addressed. You talked about the economic opportunity, and there was a lot of conversation around solar energy for a long time.
Yes.
Do you think that that is an area that is underdeveloped in New York, or do you think we've hit our peak in opportunities for some of these communities that are seeing higher poverty than others?
Well, I've learned a lot about solar energy. I thought I knew a lot about solar energy, and I did, but I've learned a lot since I've run. So if I can just give sort of an overarching view of this, I'm an AP biology teacher. I believe I understand various fields of science, and I understand how fossil fuels were formed. And it took millions of years for those fossil fuels to form, and in the past 150 years we've been pumping them out of the ground. For two reasons, I'm a proponent of increasing, our utilization of solar energy, which would be, first of all, we need a clean environment. I believe we're starting, but we need to move a little bit more aggressively to a lack of reliance on fossil fuels and more renewable energy. And that includes solar as one of those energy sources. That's one reason, is that I understand the impact of carbon emissions on our environment. And then also, just from an economic standpoint, the United States is we're a large user of fossil fuels. That market is changing because there's other countries, emerging countries, and India and China are using fossil fuels at an accelerated rate. So as a result, we're going to have to transform. There's already some guidelines out there that we reduce, that we are utilizing 50% renewable energy by 2030, and I hope that that's a realistic goal. Those sort of the things that I've known. The things that I've learned is that there is a little bit of handcuffing to that solar industry, in that if I wanted to put solar panels on a property, and I wanted the energy companies to buy back that excess energy, that I can't compete with those major power plants and energy producers or energy converters that are out there. And as a result, in a bridge to utilizing all renewable energy, hopefully at some point, we need to have a little bit of assistance for those folks, because the economics of it don't allow for solar energy converters to be able to compete in the market. And we could probably go on about that. I've learned a lot about it recently, and I think it's certainly a direction that we have to go, is the advancement of solar energy.
How important is this seat? Or do you want to grab?
I do.
Yeah.
Yes.
How important is this seat for Democrats, if you will?
Right. So, pardon me, George. As you may know, the Senate is made up of 32 Democrats and 31 Republicans. One Democrat, Simca Felter, actually caucuses with the Republicans. So the Republicans have held a majority, and a lot of the legislation that we just discussed, legislation tied to the protection of children, did not make it through the Senate. So anyway, this is a seat that's been held by Republicans for 52 years. Tarky Lombardi and John DeFrancisco, both very well respected, both very powerful men. But maybe surprisingly is that the district breaks out to about a third Democratic, a third Republican, and a third independent. And what we've seen is that Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump in the district by 5 points, and Barack Obama beat Mitt Romney in the district by 12 points. So this is a district that the independents lean Democratic. And regardless of party, I hope that the voters are going to vote for the person. I hope that my message is going to resonate with them. But it is an important seat. It is an important seat, and there's many important seats that are out there across the state that I know that Democrats are hoping that some of them that have been in Republican hands for a long time are going to flip over to the Democratic side.
If you're in Onondaga County,
yes,
and I'm sure Cayuga County,
right,
you undoubtedly hear this. Is it a 5-letter word? I guess taxes.
Yes, right,
right,
right, yes,
so taxes, right. People, New York, we've got a burden that a lot of other states do not have.
That's right.
Voters want to know.
Yes.
Is there any potential for tax relief? And if so,
right.
How do you see that coming through?
Well, as a teacher myself, I have seen. I believe that those taxes that I pay and contribute to quality services that are out there, and I think if people move to other states, they might find lower taxes, and they might find some negative impact regarding like public education or other services. So my children, I believe, have had an A+ education.
Public school.
Public schools, that's right. And I believe that my school district delivers those same quality services. That being said, I'm also a property owner, and I understand what the property taxes are. We, not so long ago, instituted a property tax cap, which I've seen some of the negative impact that has on budgeting for school districts and smaller municipalities. But I'm a native Central New Yorker. I understand that we are a high tax state. We need to be careful with those public dollars when we send them out to private projects or public projects. And we also have to be careful regarding our taxation. We just simply can't continue to raise taxes and fees. And I think that what we've seen in recent years with that property tax cap, some of the stereotype that's out there with Democrats is, well, they want to raise taxes. But that tax cap was instituted with a Democratic state assembly and a Democratic governor. So I think any elected official in New York State, especially upstate New York, has to understand that taxation is something that we always have to look at, and we have to be careful with whenever there's any attempt to raise a tax or a fee, especially in upstate New York.
We still have a few minutes left for your questions. We're Facebook Live. I always want to say give us a call because that's what I'm used to saying. But get your fingers working if you have a question about John Mannion. He's a Democratic candidate for the 50th Senate District. And John, one of the issues that a lot of people in our area are talking about right now is opioids and,
yes.
and what does the state need to do more, or do you think the state is doing enough? Do you think communities are doing enough around this particular crisis?
Yes, I agree with you that it is a crisis, George, for sure. I have seen the direct impact of that, not in my immediate family or anything like that, thank goodness, but I have seen it out there.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen it within families that live in our district and the district that I work in. It is a crisis, and I believe that what we're looking towards is holding some of these pharmaceutical drug companies accountable, and we're also looking at alternative sources of pain relief, because as you may know, and I've heard these stories, as someone has surgery or someone has an injury, they get put on a pain reliever that is opioid based, and they can't get off of it. And so I think we have to do more. I mean, we're losing many people to this crisis. I know that police enforcement is overwhelmed with their responses to these opioid situations. And I've even heard the phrase from law enforcement, it's all opioid. Maybe a few years ago there were drug-related incidents that had to be addressed by law enforcement, but now they said it seems like almost every call we're out there having to deal with the opioid crisis. So I think there needs to be a well-coordinated funding from the state.
Is it for treatment?
Assist.
Is it because people don't know? I mean,
yeah. I believe it has to be multifactorial.
Okay.
I believe it's going to involve legislation. I believe it has to involve education. I believe it has to involve treatment. And at a time where we're seeing an increase in mental health issues,
mm-hmm.
In our society, there was just a change that we're going through that ties to mental health being embedded in the curriculum. At West Genesee, I believe that we've already done some of that ahead of time, but that is tied to the opioid crisis, and that's part of the education that has to happen for some of our students. So
you've been knocking on doors.
I have.
And going to festivals and marching in parades.
I have, yes.
What are you hearing people say to you?
Right. Well, I think I hear the same thing over and over again. It's really what I led off with, George, is that they feel a frustration. They are frustrated. They feel like there is sometimes a disconnect, that things are out of their hands. And this is why I feel like it's important for someone like me and other people, and there's very good people already in office. I get to talk with those people. I've met those people, and I believe they're great representatives, without using any names, great representatives of our area. But I feel like we need more common people that are not worried about political incumbency, that are not worried about ascending up the political ladder. I think that's something I've heard from people. And another thing, you can love or hate Michael Bloomberg, but I'm going to use a quote from Michael, which is, he said the greatest threat to our democracy is not communism or North Korea. The greatest threat to our democracy is the chronic lying that is occurring in politics, and the fact that we have accepted that chronic lying. We know that some of our elected leaders are going to lie. We expect them to, and we just move on as if it doesn't matter. And I believe
well, at least they tried to act as if it was the truth.
Yeah,
they
right.
don't do that anymore.
No, they don't, and we know that. Right. So we need. I feel strongly, and I believe the people I went door to door with feel strongly about a return to civility in government and decency, and making sure that we are protecting all citizens and not making changes that are favorable to maybe the ultra wealthy, I believe some circles call them.
So do you have family? You did say you were married.
Yes, I have 3 children. Yes, my son Jack is at Lemoyne College. He's a sophomore. He's an accounting major. I would say that public school system served him very well. He's a very hard worker. He actually volunteers for Patrick Beeline's Lemoyne basketball team. He's a manager on that team. He was at a workout this morning at 7:15.
Yay.
I was surprised to see him up and at 'em this morning with me. And then I have a daughter, Quinn. She's a junior. She plays the clarinet. Junior in high school.
Yes,
Thank you. She's junior in high school at West Hill. She plays the clarinet.
Hey, I played the clarinet.
Nice.
Marching band?
No, they don't have a marching band at West Hill.
Oh,
no,
right.
They do.
I'm thinking you're in the district.
Yes.
The Wildcats.
We are very pro marching band here at West Genesee.
Okay, yes.
Plays the clarinet, plays soccer. She participates in track and field. She pole vaults. And then my youngest son, Brady, he was in the school musical. He plays the trumpet. He taught himself how to play the piano. He's a soccer, basketball, and lacrosse player. So we're busy. We're on the, my wife, Jennifer, who went to Bishop Grimes, grew up in Eastwood, went to SU, and went to Lemoyne. We're busy transporting them around, but we love it.
I know that life.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
I think lived that life.
Yeah, I think I've seen some of that online. Yeah.
What's the major difference you think between you and your opponent?
Well, I believe that I have not been corrupted by the political process. And I think we're at a crossroads with politics and government where that's really important. That's really important. I also feel like I have gone through, like I stated, I've gone through the grievance process. I've negotiated contracts, and I've gotten through that with a very positive relationship with both the administration of West Genesee, the Board of Education at West Genesee, and then my 400 members that I represent. I had a contract that we negotiated. We believe it was good for the school district, good for the taxpayers, good for my 400 members, and that was ratified 366-0. So I'm very proud of that. Yes.
Well, I tell you, John, here's your last chance
to
tell the voters
right
why they should pick you.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that, George. I appreciate your time. My name's John Mannion. I've been a teacher for a long time, but I have also advocated locally and in Albany on issues. Some of those issues involving public education, but other issues as well. I feel like I would be a strong advocate and a direct connection to the people of Central New York. I've lived here my whole life, and I ask for your vote and I ask for your support, and I would be honored to represent this area that I love so much.
All right, John. Good luck to you.
Thank you, George.
That's John Mannion. John is a candidate for the 50th Senate District seat here in Central New York.
Yeah, that's safe.
Because we're all over the place.
We are, yes. Yeah.
And we wish you good luck.
Thank you, George. I appreciate your time.